All right, so this first resume is a pretty interesting one. It's sort of a non-standard format, so we'll talk about that in a minute, but let's go through the resume first. So at the top we have a name and it says React/front-end developer. One thing I would say is I would probably just say front-end developer instead of React/front-end developer, or at the very least make two versions of this and don't submit this version to companies that aren't very clear that React is like a core competency that they're looking for, just because calling yourself a React developer can sort of pigeonhole you a little bit. And then we have this sort of statement about yourself. Personally, I would probably remove this. I don't think it does a whole lot. Recruiters are only going to spend like 30 seconds on your resume, maybe a minute if you're lucky. So they're probably not going to read this, and it's probably just wasting space. And it probably doesn't say a whole lot that's really going to move the needle at all. So usually these like summary statements I would just remove. And then we have this section with an email, a phone number, a location, LinkedIn, GitLab, and GitHub. I think this is all fine. And then we have work experience. So we have React developer at this company and some bullet points. And then we have another React developer company and some bullet points. One thing that I think is a little bit strange here is that this one is 2022 till present, and this one ended in 2022. So I would flip these. So put these essentially in just chronological order. So the most recent one should be at the top, which is going to be this one here. In terms of the actual bullet points, I think these are pretty good. So most of them have some kind of action verb like reduced, and then we have response time by 20%. So we have some metrics, which is good, and essentially how exactly we did this through optimized REST calls in React. I would be a little bit more specific though. So for example, here we've optimized REST calls in React, and here we have optimized React components. I don't know exactly what these things mean, so maybe being a little bit more specific on what exactly it is that you did could be helpful. And then this bullet in the middle doesn't really tell me anything about what you did. It's very generic. Like you could say this for basically any React project and any React developer. So I'd maybe be a little bit more specific. Like I can't look at this and even know what this company does or what projects you actually worked on. So I would try to make that more clear. And this is actually another reason that I would put this bottom one up here as the first work experience. And that's because the bullet points are a little bit better. So these are more clear on what exactly it is that you actually did. What are the projects you worked on? And then we also have some of those metrics and things to show the result of your work. One thing I would probably remove is this section here where it says technology to free insurance businesses from legacy constraints. Like this feels like you're like trying to sell me on this company or something, which is a little bit odd. It's also odd that there's one of these here, but there's not one for this company. So if you do want to describe what the companies do, that's fine, and do it for both or do it for neither. And I wouldn't do it in this way where it's almost like a mission statement. I would more just be more clear of like what exactly is this company. Then we have education, which is good. But one thing I would do down here is one, again, I would flip these. So put the most recent one, which is this master's degree on the top. And then I would also list some relevant coursework. So for example, data structures and algorithms and whatever other sort of software engineering, computer science coursework that is relevant to the jobs you're applying to, I would put here as well. And another thing you could potentially add here is your GPA. And generally the rule for this that I use is if your GPA is below a 3.0, don't list it. And this is on a 4.0 scale, by the way. So if you're in a country or university using a different scale, you might need to adapt it a bit. But if it's below a 3.0 on a 4.0 scale, don't list it. If it's a 3.0 to a 3.5, you can list it. It's not going to hurt, but it's probably not going to help a lot either. So it's sort of up to you. If it's between a 3.5 and a 4.0, I would 100% list it because that will probably help to just show that you've done well in your coursework. All right, then we have this skills section, which is good. But one thing I would do with this is sort of organize this a little bit. So maybe have programming languages and then other technologies and tools, something like that, to make this a little bit more organized. Because realistically, if I'm trying to parse this resume in 30 seconds to a minute, I'm not going to have time to look at all of these. I'm probably just going to see the first few, like, okay, JavaScript, TypeScript, React, this person's a front-end developer, got it. And I'm not going to look through all of these, versus if it was more organized, I might be able to look through all of them a little bit quicker. And then with the projects, I think the section is good and the bullets look good, but it is a little bit confusing. So for example, this project looks like it's the project that was part of this job. And generally speaking, the project section is for like projects outside of your work. So these should be projects either from classwork, projects from hackathons, or just personal projects that you've worked on. But I wouldn't put work projects here. So work projects should go in the bullet points with the work experience, and then sort of other personal projects should be in this project section. So it's a little bit confusing when the things listed under projects are for companies. I probably wouldn't do that. And now I do want to talk about this layout a little bit. So generally speaking, I tend to recommend recommend people stick to very simple layouts, mostly because they're easy to parse. It's what recruiters are sort of used to, and they work well with ATS. So these are applicant tracking systems that a lot of companies use to automatically sort of ingest your resume into some system. And if your resume is very complex in the formatting, sometimes this won't work very well. That said, for people who are more specialized in design or the front end, it can be nice to have a sort of pretty resume like this. And I do think that this resume is somewhere in between, where it does a good job of sort of showcasing some design skills while not being too over the top. So I actually do like this design for the most part. But one thing I would say is do make sure that these automated systems are able to actually read your resume. And a very simple way you can actually do this is just go to the resume in a PDF format, so the format that you are going to be giving it to companies in, and simply do Command A to highlight everything, and then Command C to copy everything. Then you can come over to a text editor, and you can use the Notes app on your computer or whatever, just very basic text editor you want, but don't use something like a code editor or Microsoft Word, something very, very basic. So this is onlinetexteditor.com. It's a very basic text editor. I'm going to paste everything in. So Command V, and you can see this is that entire resume pasted in sort of plain text. And the important thing to do here is not to make sure that the formatting looks good, because it's not going to, but to make sure that one, just everything is still there, and two, that everything is in the proper order. So for example, here I can see we have work experience and then React developer and this company name, but then we have these skills are sort of getting in between here before we get to the bullets related to that company. And then we have the next React developer. So sort of the order of things here is getting a little bit messed up. So I would work with whatever it is that you used to generate this resume and try to get it to where that order is not going to be messed up, because there's a good chance that something like this could potentially confuse those automated systems. And there are some websites online that let you do this in a more sophisticated way, but I have found that just pasting into some basic text editor does a pretty decent job as well. All right, next resume. So we have the name, a phone number, an email address, a LinkedIn, a portfolio, and Seattle, Washington. One thing I will say is with the email address, I don't love using your .edu email address. The reason being, so I used my university email address for my resumes when I was applying to jobs, when I was applying to internships and new grad jobs. And that seemed fine and it seemed logical. But one thing I realized is once I graduated, I actually lost access to my email account. So I cannot use my UW email anymore. So all of the connections that I had built up with different recruiters who had emailed me through my resume, I no longer have, because I don't have access to that email anymore. Now, this can differ from university to university. So if your university is one of the schools that actually lets you keep access to your email, then it's a non-issue. But if they're not, then personally, I would probably just use like a Gmail, just because it does allow you to keep those connections long term. But okay, so first of all, we have education, a master's degree with some coursework. And I like that we have data structures and algorithms absolutely first. This is what I always recommend. Have that as the first class that you mention, because it is the most important one. It's the one that recruiters are looking for, because that's what they use in the coding interviews. Then we also have object-oriented programming and cloud computing. And then in the bachelor's degree, distributed systems, database management systems, and machine learning. All of that seems good to me. And like I said in the last one, you can also include your GPA if you want, if it is high enough, but that is sort of up to you and based on how high that GPA actually is. And also, if you have two different degrees and one of the GPAs meets the threshold and the other doesn't, I probably wouldn't include them at all unless one was close and the other was very good. So for example, if you had like a 4.0 in your master's degree and a 3.0 in your bachelor's, I would still include it because the master's degree GPA is super good. But if you had like a 1.5 in your bachelor's degree and then in your master's degree, you would like a 3.7, I'd probably just not include either GPA. But if you include just one, it seems a little odd because it's almost like, oh, what are you hiding from me by not showing the other GPA? So yeah, just a thing to think about. But okay, next we have experience. So graduate teaching assistant, software development engineer, software engineering intern, and software development intern. And yeah, I don't have a whole lot of feedback on any of this. I think these bullet points are pretty good. I also think it's good that you list the technology stacks right here next to the company names. Makes it very easy to quickly parse this, get an understanding of what you've used on a professional level. I also like that you are putting in bold all of these different metrics, because metrics are very important and something that recruiters are looking for. And you're just helping them make it easier for them to quickly parse this resume. Now, one small piece of feedback I would give is we have these little icons that presumably open something, but I don't know by looking at this what these open. Are these opening a project? Are these opening the company website? And it looks like it is the company website. That's just not very clear to me by seeing these. So I would maybe remove these because, for one, if they want to find like the Zoyride company website, they can just Google Zoiride. So I don't know that that's super valuable. If it was linking to some specific project that you personally made, maybe that would be good. But even then, I would use text like you have here, where it's clear that this is a link and where it says what that link is actually going to go to, versus when it's just a little icon, I have no idea what that's actually going to link me to. So I'm unlikely to click it, and I'm more likely to just be a little bit confused. Okay, so now we have this section, open source contributions and achievements, which I like having this on here, but I do think this formatting is a little bit odd. So it's like we have these dates, May 2021 to July 2021. And then we say Meta, Microsoft, and Elastic. And we have the languages again. And it's sort of trying to keep the same formatting as you have an experience, which I understand, but it doesn't really make sense here because this makes it feel like these are all bullet points related to the same thing, but they're not. These are all just independent, separate things. So I would find a way to separate these out more. And it's okay if the formatting of the different sections isn't the exact same. So the formatting of this open source section does not need to be the same as the formatting of the experience section. So I would find a way to make it more clear what exactly these different things are, but the actual bullet points I think are good and the content of this is good. It's just a little bit hard to quickly parse what exactly is going on here. And I would also maybe simplify this and just say open source. Maybe achievements needs to be a different section, or if you do want to include them, maybe open source and achievements. I just think this is a little bit wordy sounding with all of this. Next, we have projects, and we have 2 projects listed: AI resume verification tool for recruiters and peer-to-peer file transfer system. And I really don't have any feedback on this section. I like it. I like that we have a tool that was built for recruiters, and that this is first because recruiters are the people looking at your resume. So they're just naturally probably going to be interested in this, which is good. Then we have skills, and I like the way this is broken up. So languages, frameworks, developer tools, and tools and APIs. So it's very clear what the different sections are, and it's sort of easy to parse in this way. One piece of feedback I would give here is that there's a lot of space. So the part on the right is very far away from the stuff on the left. So I'd maybe move that over a little bit. And then also developer tools and APIs feel the same. So I don't necessarily understand the difference in these categories. So maybe think a little bit more on what exactly these categories should be. For example, I wouldn't call SQL a developer tool. Like SQL is a programming language. Same thing with MongoDB. MongoDB is a type of database. I wouldn't really call this a developer tool. Versus something like Docker, maybe I would call that a developer tool, but to me, developer tools means things like VS Code. So I don't think developer tool is the right language to be using here. And then, for example, we have tools and APIs, and tools is very generic. And then APIs, I'm not really sure what here is an API other than you say that you know to use RESTful APIs, but that's not like a specific API. And this makes me feel like you're going to tell me about some specific APIs you've used. Again, I think the categories maybe need some reshaping, but the overall structure I like. And formatting wise, I think this resume is good. One small thing I would say though, and this is sort of a design text principle, I guess, is you have these headings, and the headings relate to the things below them, but they're actually, it looks like, closer to the things above them. So we have open source contributions and achievements, and this looks like it's either equidistant or even potentially a little bit closer to this bullet above it than it is to the thing below it. And the heading should be closer to the thing that it is related to than the thing that it's not related to. So I would add some sort of margin above these headings, or maybe just move them down a little bit so that they are closer to the things below them. So essentially more margin above, less margin below if you want the same spacing, or you can just add more margin above and leave the margin below as it is. Next up, we have a pretty simple resume, and I actually like simple resumes sometimes. So here we have education, we have a university, bachelor's of science in computer science, and the dates. One thing I would say here is I would add some relevant coursework, particularly make sure that data structures and algorithms is on there if you've taken the class yet, because it looks like you are pretty early in school, or you're pretty close to graduating, so you've probably taken that by now. So I'd make sure that's in there, as well as some other relevant coursework. And same thing I've said before, GPA, if it fits that criteria of at least a 3.0, maybe include it, or above a 3.5, definitely include that. All right, next in experience, we have full stack software developer, and full stack developer. One small thing I would say here, just sort of stylistically, make sure that all of these are capitalized. So full stack developer, capitalize every word like you do in the other ones. This also looks like the font in this one might be bigger than these ones, so I would check on that as well. Also, I didn't say this on the previous resume, but I think it might be a good point to say now, and it does apply to some of the previous ones. If you have a bunch of job titles that are basically the same thing, so we have full stack software developer, full stack developer, software developer, you can just make them all the same. So you don't need to have the exact job title as it appears sort of like in your hiring process or whatever. So if one company called you a full stack software developer and the other called you a full stack software engineer and another called you a full stack developer, whatever it might be, you can put them all as the same name on your resume just for consistency. And then also make sure to be consistent with the spelling of things. So here we have full stack as one word, here it's 2 words. It can be either, but just make it consistent. Usually if it's 2 words, you'll want to hyphenate it, but either one is fine. Just be consistent. As far as the bullet points go, I think these are pretty good, but one thing I would try to do is add some metrics where you can. This can be difficult to do because just finding good metrics is hard at times. A lot of things don't really have metrics for them, but if you can, try to find at least a few metrics that you can add to show results of the work that you did. And then with the projects section, I'm going to give feedback similar to what I've given some other people. I think the formatting of this is good, but I'm a little confused on what of these are like personal projects and what are work projects. So for example, this is the same name as this company. So I'm assuming that this is a project you did while working here, in which case this just belongs with this experience. That is work experience. It's not like a personal project. Some of these other ones, so we have Bisler functioning as CEO, focusing on software solutions for local businesses. This to me is a little bit confusing because first of all, functioning as CEO feels a little bit odd, just like the wording of it, but also if you're the CEO of a company, that would be work experience at that point. So like, is this a personal project that you're trying to make seem super intense or super special by using terms like CEO when there's not really an actual company structure, in which case just remove that and say what you actually did? Or is this an actual company that has like proper company structure to it and whatnot, in which case put it as work experience. Be clear with what exactly these things are, because it's kind of hard at times to look at these and understand what exactly you did. And I think with a lot of these too, it's not very clear to me what the technical aspects of these were. What were the languages and frameworks being used, and what were sort of the technical challenges that you actually solved? That is oftentimes more important than like a position or than even the actual project itself. It's important to know what the actual project is, especially if it had good outcomes, if it had good metrics attached to it, but it's equally as important to understand what the technology is and what problems you were able to solve. Also, on this rideshare app, you don't need to put inactive. Most projects on most people's resumes are not really actively being worked on or actively being used. So it's perfectly fine to not include that. And even the same thing up here, you say defunct for this company. And I don't think you necessarily need that. Like, it's not really adding anything to your resume. And it's not like that company having gone out of business really has any impact on what exactly you did. The one thing I would say is maybe with this one, it makes sense to include it here because this was such a short period of time to show that you didn't just job hop immediately, that you probably left this company because it went out of business. So I think it might be fine to leave here, but just a general principle for everybody watching, you don't really need to put things like defunct next to company names if the company's going out of business. And then we have technical skills down here. I like the way that this is organized. One thing I will say is maybe try to take this developer tools section and break it into 2 sections. It going onto multiple lines, just to me makes it seem like it's too much going on here. And a recruiter's not likely to read through all of this. Try to break that up potentially, and I think that would help. Or maybe just remove some things like VS Code, PyCharm, and IntelliJ. Those aren't really skills. Like, every developer knows how to use an IDE. Like, these are text editors. So I don't think that's really a skill. So I would honestly just remove these and maybe find a way to just get this to be slightly shorter so it stays on one line. All right, so next up, we have another 2-column layout. We say software engineer and a name up here. We have a phone number, an email, and a LinkedIn, which I think is fine. One thing I will say is maybe replace the Yahoo email with the Gmail. It seems a little odd to me to have a particularly technical person using like a very old school email. I don't think anybody's going to be like, oh, I have to throw this resume in the trash. They used Yahoo, but it does sort of feel a little odd. And I think subconsciously it might make people question their resume a little bit. All right, so next we have professional experience. So first we have this software engineering job, which is the present job. And the one thing I'm confused about here is it looks like we have 2 different company names. So we have ExpressVPN and Cape Technologies. So I don't know which one you work for, or if like these are related things. So I would make that more clear. Where is the actual place that you work for? And then the bullet points I think are pretty good. They might be a little bit wordy at times, and maybe you could try to include some metrics if possible, but generally speaking, I think these look pretty good. And then we have senior software engineer at GoPro, and we have this big sort of paragraph thing going on here. I would remove this. If the content in here is important, move them into bullet points, but straight up, people aren't going to read this paragraph. People don't like reading paragraphs, and recruiters are going through these resumes so quickly that the chances that they read all this, very, very low. And then we also have key achievements and this front end, back end platform payment section. This is just different than what we have up here. So I would just be consistent with the formatting. I don't hate this key achievements formatting. If that's the formatting you want to go with, it's sort of unique, but I would just be consistent. It doesn't make sense to have 2 different job experiences and have the formatting completely different. And then there's another sort of paragraph down here below the key achievements. And again, I would remove this. People aren't going to read it. And it doesn't really say a whole lot. Strengthened my technical expertise and my ability to deliver projects in collaboration with cross-functional teams. I mean, like, I would hope so. It looks like you worked at this company for 5 years. I would hope that that strengthened your technical expertise and ability to deliver projects. This is sort of a given. It's not telling me anything new, so I would just remove this altogether. And then it looks like we have an internship. And one thing I would say is move the internship part away from the company. So either put another vertical bar or say like robotics engineer intern. But the way it's like ABB internship is a little confusing. And I don't know if ABB is a company name or if that's an internship program name. So I would just make that whole thing a little bit more clear. And then these bullet points, they look like they're a different format. Like they're more indented than these ones were. And the font seems smaller and there's not much to them. Like these aren't really telling me much of what actually happened. So I would try to make these bullet points look more like the bullet points you have up here. So even though it's an internship, you still want to have good bullet points describing what exactly it is that you actually did. And if you are running low on space, which I don't think you should be if we get rid of like this big paragraph, but if you do end up running low on space, one thing you can do is just remove the internship, which I know feels bad. Like you worked hard at that internship. And I wouldn't tell this to most people, but you've gotten a lot of professional experience at this point. So this internship was all the way back in 2018. This was 7 years ago. So it could be at the point where this is starting to fall off of the resume. Although that said, I do think there's a lot of ways to get more space on this resume if you need it. So we can get rid of this paragraph. The header is huge. There's a lot of space up here. So we could sort of move that all up and remove some of the spacing there. And then next we have this about section. And that's another way to get more space is I would remove this. I don't think this is adding anything. I don't think people are likely to even read it. But if they do, it's not really going to tell them a whole lot. It's just sort of generic. It's like, I'm passionate about building tech. Like, okay, aren't all software engineers? Like nobody's going to pretend that they're not passionate about building tech. So yeah, I don't think this about section is necessary and I would just remove it. Next, we have a skills section and this looks good to me. I think this is well organized. It's pretty easy to quickly parse the different skills. And then we have core competencies. So problem solving and analytical thinking, project ownership and leadership, collaboration, communication, adaptability and continuous learning, scalability and performance optimization. Personally, I would remove this. I don't think this is saying a whole lot. Like nobody's going to apply to a job and be like, by the way, I have horrible communication skills. I'm bad at problem solving. Like nobody's going to say that. It doesn't really tell me anything, right? Like if I'm trying to hire somebody and it says on their resume, I'm good at problem solving and leadership and collaboration and communication. Okay. Like I don't know what to think about that. Like, I don't know what that means. It's not quantifiable. You're not telling me like hard skills that you have and soft skills, at least in particularly technical fields like software development, I think need to be shown rather than told. Now, maybe this is a regional thing. So I live in the US. My experience is working on resumes in the US and I see this resume is not for somebody in the US. So maybe this is more common where you live and this could be something to keep. At least if you're applying to tech companies in the US, I would say that a section like this, probably not necessary. And it's not like hurting the resume. Like nobody's going to see this and be like, nope, time to throw this resume out too. It's got a core competencies section, but I don't think it's adding a whole lot. And the resume already has a lot of text on it. It's very wordy and it's hard to parse. I think removing sections like this is what can make it have more space, be easier to parse, have room for longer bullet points for the internship, be able to space things out a little bit more. So I would personally remove that, but again, up to you. And then we have certifications with this AWS certified developer. I would maybe put a little bit more context here because I don't know what this means. And I would imagine a lot of people wouldn't know what this means. So maybe have a little bit more context on what exactly this is. And then we have education. And again, I would add more context. So I would mention some related coursework and I would potentially mention your GPA if it is above that threshold we've been talking about the whole video. And again, by removing some of these more wordy sections like the about section and the core competencies, you'll be able to have more room for things like the certification and your education to expand on them a little bit more. And formatting wise, if you're able to do it, I would probably convert this into a single column layout. I just think they work better. I'm not a huge fan of 2-column layout resumes in general. There are certain times when that 2-column layout I think is adding a lot to the resume for one reason or another. But here I think it's actually just making it a little bit harder to read. So if you're able to fit it in a single column, I would do that. So it's not like the end of the world to keep it as a 2-column layout. Just make sure that you are able to scan it in the same way I showed earlier in the video. All right, so this one we have the name and they anonymized it. And then we have a phone number, email, LinkedIn, GitHub and the location as Canada. I might be a little bit more specific than just Canada. You might want to say the province you're in or something like that. And then we have education, university of whatever, Bachelor of Software Engineering, co-op program, a GPA, Dean's honor list. Okay, cool. The dates, city, province, looks good. Relevant coursework, agile software engineering, object-oriented programming, clean code and design principles, web development, data structures and algorithms, database systems, server-side scripting, networks, operating systems. Awesome. The one thing I would do is take data structures and algorithms and plop it first. Make it the first thing they see, because that is the one class that a lot of recruiters are trained to sort of look for. So make it be the first one in relevant coursework. Otherwise, education section looks great. Then we have experience, software engineer intern, IT analyst intern, and we have the different companies and the different dates. And formatting wise, this looks super easy to parse. Love the format on this resume. Good job on that. And let's look at the actual bullet points. And yeah, all of these bullets look pretty good to me. So they start with action verbs. A lot of them have metrics. So 400,000 users, 30%, 100 plus regression and unit tests. So these metrics are good to sort of show what exactly you did and the actual outcome of what you did. So I think you're doing a very good job of this. And we also have some different technologies listed throughout here. So I see JavaScript and Scala and Postgres and all these different things. So good job on these bullets. One thing you could do if you want, that a lot of people like to do, and we saw this on a resume earlier, is you could bold some of these metrics. So for example, 30%, 100 plus. You could bold these if you want, but it's up to you. Some people like doing that, others don't. It's just a personal preference. On the second software engineer intern, one thing I would do is reorder these a little bit. So this bottom bullet point feels important. It's about like what you did and it has metrics in it, versus this third one is sort of generic and it's just like, I collaborated with a team. Honestly, this bullet could be removed altogether, but if you want to keep it, put this at the bottom. So put the ones that are like, oh, what I actually did at the beginning. So just swap this one and this one, because this one actually has metrics on it and this one is sort of fluff. So if you are going to have these a little bit fluffy type bullet points, put them at the bottom or just remove them altogether. Next, we have a project section, and this looks pretty good to me. I like the fact that we have the tech stack right here. You might want to do this on the work experience as well if you want. It's up to you. But one thing I would say with these is maybe make these bullet points instead of these sort of longer, they're not really sentences, but they're kind of just bullet points without the actual like dot. So I'd probably make these bullet points. And then specifically with this second one, it just says AWS application development. And this doesn't tell me what it did at all. It just sort of tells me that you deployed an application to AWS, which is good, but I would have a bullet point on what this actually is. And the title of this should be what the project actually was, not just that you used AWS essentially. And then we have this leadership section, and it has a hackathon, and it says you got second place at this hackathon, which is great. What I would do though is this is not really leadership. Leadership to me is like you were a manager for people, or you organized a hackathon, or you organized some club or something. This is just like you led a team at a hackathon, which I don't know, this doesn't really feel like leadership, to be honest. I would move this into the projects and just make this one of the projects and have a bullet point under it that's like, hey, we won $3,000 of funding and we got second place at this hackathon. I think that's a better way to do it than to call this leadership. It feels a little bit odd and almost disingenuous. And then we have technical skills, and I think the formatting looks good, but I am going to nitpick the sort of naming conventions here again, because I do think these are important. So first of all, I would change programming probably to either languages or programming languages, just to be a little bit more clear. And then we have frameworks. And the first thing I see is REST API. REST APIs are not a framework. A REST API is a sort of format of an API, but that's not a framework. So I would move this somewhere else. Also, maybe a little bit nitpicky, but agile methodologies are not a database or developer tool. It is a methodology of development, but it's not a like specific physical thing. So I don't know. This feels a little bit odd in here, but I do think that's fine to leave because I don't know where you could better put it. And now, by the way, resumes are super important for landing an interview to eventually get a job in tech, but there's also a lot of other things that can play a role, including that resume. So if you're curious about some of those things, you should watch this video next.